Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us today for the Cabinet meeting. If we ask for any apologies, we do know Councillor Devlin can't attend today. I think everyone else is here. We're quorate and we can move on. Any declarations of interest from members? Andrew, I'm assuming that's a no.
No.
Thank you. So we'll move on. I think, Lorraine, you're going to introduce the next paper.
No,
Louise?
Provost, sorry.
Not yet.
I'm the wrong meeting.
Not
I'm
yet.
the wrong meeting. Leader, it's Louise Pringle that will introduce the digital transformation paper.
So if we go on to item number 3, the digital transformation programme, and if we can ask Louise to give an introduction to that paper. Thank you very much.
Morning, everyone. Thanks, Chair. This report takes a backward look at the achievements of our digital transformation programme in 2021-22 and also begins to give an idea of the planned projects for the year ahead. I'll maybe, with your indulgence, say a little bit more than I would normally this morning because this is a new Cabinet meeting and just to try and give a bit of background about the programme that we have here. This is the Council's third major programme of transformation and change and is based on our digital transformation strategy, which was approved last year. Over the last few years, most of our corporate change capacity has been invested in the procurement and implementation of key line of business ICT systems, which in many cases replaced ageing legacy systems. These implementations included our finance procurement, HR payroll, council tax and benefits system and our customer contact platform and website. And several of these were implemented during the pandemic and in the context of a remote workforce and with remote suppliers. So I would pay credit to our teams who've managed and coped with such significant changes, which would have been challenging enough in normal times, but especially so in the context of the pandemic. Our current digital transformation strategy programme concentrates on 3 main areas. Customer experience, which is about really a consistent, efficient customer experience designed with the user and making best use of the Scottish approach to service design wherever we can. We have business systems and processes, which is about optimising our new systems to drive out the business benefits now and ensure efficient end-to-end processes. And then workforce productivity, which is about enhancing the way we use Microsoft 365 and data within the organisation. There are detailed programmes of work in each of these areas. I'll be honest, not all of these projects are transformational in nature. Many are need-to-do projects that will keep systems in contract, that will manage upgrades and that will meet new requirements, so payment card industry and security requirements, for example. These projects rely on shared resources. We call shared resources things like IT, accountancy, HR, digital customer experience. They're shared right across the organisation. And there can often be pressures of business as usual versus projects, and we need to manage that carefully within the project environment. We are an ambitious council though, and as well as the need to do stuff, there is a lot we also want to achieve, and we keep backlog lists of projects and improvements that we want to do and use a project prioritisation method to look carefully at resource and requirements and benefits. We have renewed cross-cutting programme boards in place, governance boards in place now that make decisions about what gets done and how, and there is oversight and escalation from the corporate management team at least quarterly. A key priority for us, and you'll see that in the paper itself, is to sharpen the focus on quantifiable benefits from these projects. This is really important to us for project prioritisation purposes, but also in terms of our contribution to savings for the budget process and identifying those savings, and also transforming the expectations and experiences of our customers. Given the nature of some of the changes, it can sometimes be challenging to draw a straight line from implementation of a digital process to a tangible saving or benefit, but it is important that we can scrutinise the cost versus the benefit of the work that we do here. Our last change programme, the Modern Ambitious programme, and the Council's focus on its 5 capabilities, modernisation, digital, data, prevention and community empowerment, generated nearly £12 million of savings over its run in 2018 to 2021. Over the last year, I would highlight the following as key achievements of the programmes. So in customer experience, decommissioning our old customer record management system and moving all of our customer forms and processes to our new platform. Developing and testing our new customer portal, which you will have seen has gone live, My Eastren, and our online council tax service, which has gone live in May as well. Developing new online processes for the various and many COVID grants and payments, and also for HSCP digital delivery during COVID. We've also benefited from the highest uptake in Scotland of the Education Parents Portal, which reduces paper transactions and cash handling in schools. And we have new online processes for the various high-volume environment processes like bulky uplifts, replacement bins, and the new charging scheme for brown bins. In business systems and processes, we continue to iterate the processes in the new systems. We continue to try to integrate to other systems so we can take away surrounding scaffolding systems. And we continue to train managers for greater self-service and efficiency in their use of these systems. Housing also commenced a significant system replacement, and that work started last year and will continue across this year. There's also been a lot of work to give our field workers more digital access while they're out and about on site doing their jobs. That minimises travel and reduces job completion times. And the Environment Department has also continued its sector-leading work on Internet of Things, with 1,500 sensors deployed in schools to monitor carbon dioxide, temperature and humidity. Smart grit bins and smart street lighting are also in the pipeline. For workforce productivity, this is really about getting the best use we can out of Microsoft 365 and data, and the pandemic has moved us forward leaps and bounds in the use of Teams, as we can see today, as we're all joining this meeting in various different ways. And also in January, we migrated our email estate across to Microsoft 365 for greater stability and more functionality. And we've made good progress with data dashboards. There are a lot of projects on the list for the year ahead, and a flavour of them is given in the report. If I was to summarise and give you just a couple of headlines on the key priorities in each programme area, I would say in customer, it's the shift from analogue to digital telecare. We have about 3,000 telecare clients who have the Lifeline community alarms, and we need to make sure they can benefit from that service and continue that during the digital switchover, and that will also give us new capability around monitoring. In customer, also unified communications. This is going to help us introduce more resilience in our contact centre environment, our phone environment for customers, and also the flexibility for our team members to work anywhere. And also we will continue to develop our online processes and functionality using these customer portals, making sure customers can do what they need to do when they want to do it, and that they get real-time updates on their service requests when they've put them into us. For business systems and processes, we have two significant projects in the HSCP, replacement of their fundamental care case management system and their care at home system, both time critical and significant procurements for the organisation. We've also got a lot of work to do in there to upgrade and deal with industry standard developments within our payment system for how we take card payments in the council. That's a big piece of work. And further phases of our housing system implementation. And as I said, we'll continue to work on the new systems that we put in to iterate those processes. In workforce productivity, it's around developing our capability in Microsoft 365, rolling out room bookings within Outlook. We'll be making better use of OneDrive, planner functions, lists. We'll be replacing our performance management system for the council. You'll be seeing a lot of performance reports coming out in the next few weeks to Cabinet and council meetings. They come from our performance management system. We'll be replacing that with a more dynamic dashboard system to take data from source systems and produce more dynamic reports. And we will also be developing an information governance group to coordinate how we use information within the organisation better. So I would conclude by saying, and thanks for your patience this morning around this, we have achieved a lot despite the pandemic. We launched our new programme last year. There is a lot we still want to do and need to do. Our capacity and resources don't always match our ambition, so we do need to improve our approach to project prioritisation and our benefits management to make sure we can generate the best value from our programmes and make sure we focus on efficiency and savings wherever we can. So thank you very much this morning. We're happy to take questions about reps from various departments here as well, and it is recommended that Cabinet notes the achievements of the last year and the future plans in our three areas of digital transformation. Thank you.
Louise, thank you very much for that. That was very full reports and a good update on where we are and where we're going. So thank you very much. If I can pass it on to members for any questions or comments on the report.
Thank you, Louise. That was a very in-depth report, and it's good to see what progress we are making. What is the timeline for to complete digital transformation? Are we talking over the course of the next term as a council? Are we talking as kind of over the next 10 years? What would you say the timeline would be? Obviously, we've made great steps already, but for this programme to be completed.
Thanks, Councillor Cragnell. I actually don't think this programme will ever be completed. This programme will run for as long as there are resources to run it. There will always be efficiencies that we need to make. There will always be new technologies that we need to think about. There will always be systems that we need to replace, we need to upgrade, and the more work that we do around digital, the more opportunity we will have in that space. So I don't think we'll ever be done. There'll always be more opportunity, but it is up to us to work to make the best business cases that we can for the work that we do and make sure it's delivering real benefit for us. Thanks.
Councillor Anderson.
Thank you. Louise, in particular, reading through the paper, security is a key thing nowadays, and it really didn't touch much upon how we're protecting people's credentials and how we encourage them, how to make sure that they're not compromised and so forth. I mean, I've looked at the MyGov login process and so forth. I have to confess that also as a parent, I didn't really know about Parent Portal, which I find very strange, and I'm currently using Parent Pay in education for paying, for things to do with the school. So I'm not entirely sure about. I read there was over 80% take-up. Unfortunately, I appear to be one of the 1 in 5 that haven't. I don't know why, but I think it would be good to hear about how we are making sure, especially with the current climate, we're meant to have a heightened attitude towards security with regards to how we make sure there's not any fraud happening, especially if you mentioned about standards for payment processing, which I do believe is part of that. They ask for, to make sure that people who are going through the payment process are protected and not going to be compromised. So I think it would be good in future for any, a key topic to be part of any, briefing would be security, just to make sure that we're up to date with current best practice and so forth. And could you maybe talk a bit about more about that just now?
Absolutely, thanks. Yeah, please be assured that everything we do has security at the root of it. It's fundamental to everything we do. So there's a number of different aspects to that. Murray might want to come in. He's our Head of Digital and Community Safety. He's on this meeting. He might wish to come in at the end of what I say. But underlying all of our programmes is a real need to think about cyber security and information security. We have an approach to data privacy impact assessments as well, DPIAs. They get done for all of our projects. Wherever money is involved, we have rigorous controls around financial control and compliance to make sure that we protect both ourselves and our customers from fraud. And that is part of our financial management systems as well as part of every other project that we do. So we do take those things very seriously and have really rigorous approaches. And sometimes, there will be frustrations about the length of time it takes us to do a project or the detail we have to be in to do a project. But it's those things that you've highlighted that are just so critical to making sure we get these things right and protect ourselves and the public. So yeah, please be assured we do have those things. I'll see if Murray wants to come in and say anything else. In terms of your parent pay point, parent pay is the aspect of the education system that is used best out there by parents just now. There is more functionality starting to be added on through the parent portal, so that is the bit that is emerging and being added on to nationally. So I don't think you've missed anything just yet, but as long as you're using parent pay. So thanks. Murray, do you want to add anything, please?
Yeah, thanks, Louise. So I'm responsible for information security and cyber security, so that sits within my remit. As a public sector body, and especially a local authority, we have a number of accreditations we have to meet, the main one being what's called PSN, or Public Sector Network accreditation, and that's something we have to do annually. It is more rigorous than the industry standard, the BSI standard ISO 27001, and we require to maintain that accreditation to access a number of central government systems around DWP, etc. Without that accreditation, we would not be permitted to do that. And when we talk about payments, it's PCI DSS is another standard that we have to adhere to. So we, as an organisation, maintain that accreditation through the IT function. We also have a number of best practice approaches to security. So my information security officer that reports to myself looks after the operational security and how that works. We have followed what was called the Public Sector Action Plan, which followed on from a cyber incident a few years ago now, the one that impacted the NHS. I think it was called WannaCry. So on the back of that, there was a Public Sector Action Plan put in place that all public sector bodies had to work towards. So we've adhered with that. That has now changed slightly in terms of how that is delivered, but we meet that. We also follow best practice in terms of we have links into NCSC, the National Cyber Security Centre. We have links into other public bodies in intelligence and response. And the last point we make is when there is an incident that affects a kind of partner body or another body, such as the SEPA attack a couple of years ago, we work very closely with the output of those incidents to learn lessons and identify any gaps we may have, and then implement those changes. So that's the kind of the main point. As Louis said, it is at the root of everything we do. To give an example, within the COVID world, when that first started, that was a huge swing in terms of where people were accessing data, how they were accessing data, and we had to work very fast and hard to make sure that was done in a safe and secure way. So it is a constant thread through everything from the technology up the stack into the applications and then into the business functions. And our information security officer works very closely with the whole organisation and also with the data protection officer to make sure that the technical controls we have in place support the data protection principles we have to meet. But if you wish further detail and more discussion, I'm happy to do as required around that.
Thanks, Murray. In terms of the NCSC that you mentioned, I do believe, because I was looking at it myself, there's an extra layer of protection that they're currently offering to public sector that's not available to private. Because I registered for the advance warning, where they are scanning like the dark web and all the various places to see if any data or information relating to your organisation is out there that they became aware of, and they send you a regular weekly or monthly report highlighting or giving you advance warning. So that's fine. So private sector that's available to them, but there's another layer of protection, I believe, that they are currently offering. Are we utilising that?
I don't know specifically, Councillor Anderson. I will take that as an action to confirm, but my understanding in terms of our relationship with NCSC is that we get live intelligence reports. So if there's a live incident or a detection in another public body, for example, of whether it's phishing or ransomware or whatever it might be, there's very quick communication comes out. As I say, it's live, so we see that. It's not quite daily, but every few times a week we'll get those alerts, assess and respond as required. So I suspect that's the service you're talking about, but I will go and confirm that and come back to you.
Okay, thanks. Sorry, a very final question, Murray. I didn't realise you were on here. Louise mentioned about the migration from analogue to digital. I'm assuming ISDN has been completely phased out, or is there still? Have you moved to SIP completely in terms of ISDN's getting discontinued?
Yeah, so the analog to digital programme, although the focus in the paper was around telecare, because that's probably the most significant use of analog services in the local authority area, there's a number of other impacts on this organisation around. Talks about ISDN, which we use for telephony. There's other individual analog lines. So, for example, the red line security services are based on analog services. lift phones, etc. There's lots of small pockets of analogue service within an organisation, and we'll be working towards addressing those. A lot of that will be driven by the market for those areas in terms of the ability for the suppliers to put in place a digital solution or whatever it may be. With regards to the specific question of ISDN, we still have some ISDN services underpinning our telephony. There is a project within the transformation programme around telephony which will look to address that and move us away from that analogue services onto digital.
Okay, could I let Lorraine come in, please?
Thank you very much. I just want to give a wee bit update on some of the national work that's going on that I think will supplement the Murray's response on security, as well as what Murray's talked about. For local government, we've set up a digital office, and I'm very heavily involved in that. I was the instigator of it, funded by all 32 councils, and that's where we can look at taking national approaches. And one of the posts we fund collectively is a chief Information Security Officer, Andy Grayland, highly experienced, and he acts as a link between, if there's particular security alerts, he is working very with all the UK and the Scottish Government and the National Security Centres, and acts as that link, and that brings that very fast response to all the councils in terms of getting access to information. In terms of that, he also looks at best practice and works with all the councils. So our Information Security Officer works on collective projects with Andy and many other people. And when we are looking at collective projects around councils, Andy will also look at the security aspects. So, for example, in the telecare work that Murray's involved in, he has been working to ensure the security standards for all the suppliers and get suppliers accredited to those security standards. So, as well as our local work, we can use that national work as well to make sure everything we do in local government is secure as possible. Local government, all government organisations will always be a target of cybercrime. So it's really important that we do our best, but there are no guarantees. No matter, as you know yourself, no matter how hard you try, there are people trying even harder. But we're very closely involved, both locally and nationally, and all that to connect up all the knowledge that is available and to future-proof our systems as much as possible. So happy to brief you separately on that if that would be of interest.
Thank you.
Okay, just to sum up a little bit, Louise, thank you very much for that paper and thanks for the contributions for this debate. We certainly note the progress despite the impact of COVID on delivery. I don't think we should underestimate how difficult it is to deliver on digital transformation programs in a time of COVID. I also acknowledge your points on quantifiable benefits, that there's more work to be done on that. I'm glad you addressed that, and also in terms of relative project prioritisation. Keen to see how this programme will develop over the next 3 years and what assumptions may or may not be taking into the budget plans in terms of savings or efficiencies or customer benefits as we're going through, because obviously digital transformation is a key part of delivery going forward for all of our services, and it would be very useful to see how the investment we're making in these areas is impacting on our numbers and on our delivery. So thank you very much for that indeed. If there's no other points, we'll move on to the next agenda item, which my PC has frozen, which is benchmarking, and I believe Lorraine is going to give an introduction to us on that.
Okay, thanks, Councillor O'Donnell. I'll do a short introduction, just some of the background to the benchmarking framework, and then I'll pass to Ms Pringle, who will be able to take it through in a wee bit more detail for us. Just in terms of background, the framework is about 10 years old. In the past, Audit Scotland had identified a number of statutory performance indicators for local government and had to report on these annually. There was work done with Audit Scotland to think about how that work could be moved forward, and the agreement reached was that if local government developed and monitored a new series of indicators and kept developing that work, that Audit Scotland would focus on those benchmarking indicators. So that work proceeded. The Improvement Service, which is part of the local government family, were asked to take that work forward. And just for transparency, I'm actually now on the board of the Improvement Service as part of my role as Chief Executive here. And what we've been working on I was also for many years on the board, the advisory board for the local government benchmarking framework. So what we've done over the years is to develop the indicators. The number of indicators has increased very significantly over the last 10 years. Importantly, I think to begin with, the indicators were primarily cost efficiency type indicators. And it's moved on significantly where there's much more outcome indicators, there's many more customer indicators as well, and growing number of perhaps what you call people indicators as well. That does mean there's a lot of information to take in, both in the report you've got in front of you, but also if anyone clicked on the link and looked at the national report, which I think now goes to about 150 pages and is a very extensive report of information that's now gathered. An important point is it is not a league table and was never meant to be. Being number one in a particular indicator is not always the right thing to be. And if I perhaps give an example of that in education, our strategic aim in education is always to have to do the absolutely best for the young people and children in our care, and to make sure that in terms of attainment and closing the gap, we're as high up as we can be. And you'll see in the indicators we're usually 1, 2, very much at the top, and that's a strategic intent. There's also indicators about the cost of education. We cannot achieve our strategic aim of keeping our performance very high in education if we're also the cheapest, which would make us number one. So our strategic aim there is to be maybe average for costs, because the cost indicator is a combination of efficiency and of investment. So being round about the middle of the group is about right for us. Our schools tend to be efficient because they're full, if you compare us to, say, one of the islands where there's kind of a small number of pupils. So our schools are full, so that would tend to help us be more efficient. But we do invest in our schools and in education, so being a bit middle is right. So that's give a sense. Another one would be waste collection, where our aim is to top recycling, but if you segregate your waste, that's more expensive than if you don't collect segregated waste. So again, that would be to the top recycler would be our aim, but perhaps costs more about average. So it is important to note that it is not a league table. Positions are also affected by the makeup of the area of, for example, deprivation, and also rural and urban. So we also look at family groups where the Improvement Service group us with similar councils. Now, there's no council exactly the same as us, and some may be closer matches than others, but they do that, and that maybe gives us able to just look in a wee bit more depth about how we compare to our family group. It is also, the information is provided as a can opener. It may be that we look at an indicator, and I'll give a couple of examples of ones we've looked at in the last year, where we look and think, is that really where we want to be? Is that right? And we'll look at that indicator in some depth. It does take quite a lot of time. It's quite an intensive process. We'll work with perhaps with improvement services or with other councils to just look at that and see, and we'll try and find out, why is our indicator there? Is it a performance issue, or is it a data collection issue? So if I give the example on, we looked at our support costs. Now, we would expect our support costs to be round about average would be the aim. Some of the very large councils may have more economies of scale than we have, but we'd still expect to be efficient. However, we looked at those and thought they weren't quite where we wanted to be, so we looked at them. A huge piece of work was undertaken to look at how we gather them, how we gather them and how we use that information. And as we did so, we discovered some data issues where we were perhaps categorising some costs as support costs that, having looked at the latest SIPA guidance perhaps shouldn't have been regarded. So example, we had property costs in there. So those have been now sorted, and I think when you see support costs coming out next year, you'll see that those are down. Now that's not been a performance issue, it's just been tidying up the data. So sometimes there will be an issue there. Mark's also been looking at one of the culture and leisure indicators as well to see, is it a data issue, is it something different about what we're doing? My final point would be also, if you've managed to read the report from the Improvement Services, maybe 2 points that I think are important to bring out at the moment. The first is, even though budgets for councils have been very tight for a number of years, the performance of councils generally has managed to improve. So even with budgets that have been very, very tight and in some areas reductions in budgets, people for many years managed to keep the performance the same or going up. Over just pre-COVID and now, we're starting to see that continued pressure starting to reduce performance, as you would expect. I think we did very well to keep it up for so long. The second thing is COVID. Many of our performance indicators just couldn't perform at the same level during COVID. It was just impossible. So what we are, through the national work, is looking at the years, I would say next year, when you see the data for the year just past, it's really setting a new baseline for many of the measures, and then we can start from there in the future. So COVID has changed the measures, and you'll see that next year as well. So I'm more than likely taking up everything Louise was about to say, but I'll pass to her anyway.
Just half of it, Lorraine, thank you. So yeah, just to build on that a little bit more. So this is an annual report that Cabinet would consider each year. Just bear in mind there is a data time lag, so everything else you're going to get to see in meetings coming up is for 21-22 data, but this is 2021 data that compares to the previous year. And as the Chief Executive said, there has been a COVID impact as well on some of these indicators. There's some very detailed information in the report, graphs, ranks, position against the Scottish average. There are 4 new measures in the set, including a percentage of children living in poverty, gross added value per capita, claimant count as percentage of working age population, and claimant count for benefits as percentage of 16 to 24-year-olds. In summary, we are performing, if you look at the kind of ranks in the performance, we're performing well comparatively in relation to key areas like educational attainment, school exclusion rates, child protection re-registrations, we have a low number of them, household recycling, percentage of our Class A roads that are considered for maintenance, environmental health costs, our investment in economic development, minimising delayed discharge from hospital, and residential costs per week for residents aged 65 and over. Where costs are above the national average, for example in cost of road maintenance, this reflects capital expenditure. We're investing to improve the quality of services for residents. You might see we're performing less comparatively in relation to invoice processing. We're taking a look at the methodology around about that indicator, percentage of procurement spend in small and medium-sized enterprises, the cost of attendance at sports and leisure facilities, as the Chief Exec mentioned, that's being looked at as well. Cost per dwelling of council tax, that's an interesting one because as we work on system changes, we'll have to have a project team for system changes, and those costs need applied into these measures. So you'll see a temporary blip in such indicators and such costs as we go through change. Net cost of refuse collection, as was mentioned, cost of road maintenance and home care costs per hour for people aged 65 and over. So performance in these areas is being addressed in a range of different ways. There are active discussions with departments around these indicators and being looked at as part of performance management arrangements and scrutinised carefully. So we have reps from departments with us today. We're happy to take any questions. And the recommendation today is for Cabinet to scrutinise the Council's performance against the LGBF indicators and the intended action being taken by departments to address performance issues, and to consider whether any aspect of the Council's performance is in need of improvement or further investigation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Louise. If I can ask members if they've got any questions.
Thank you, Louise, and thank you, Chief Exec. What do we, in the education section, what do we mean by pupils entering positive destinations after they leave school? What is meant by this, and do we have a breakdown of positive destinations. I don't know if Mark, as Director of Education, you would like to answer this.
Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, in terms of positive destinations, that's defined as moving on to essentially higher education, further education, employment and training, or voluntary work. So there's a kind of clear specification. It's measured through what's called the initial levers survey, which is carried out nationally by Skills Development Scotland for all the levers that take place. So for this particular data for 2021, and it's captured by the end of September of that particular year. And at that point, they look at where all the levers have got to on that particular day. So it provides a little bit of a snapshot. So that is very helpful on one level, but it also has a risk in that perhaps the next day somebody that has moved on to higher education might no longer be in higher education, they might have dropped out. So you'll notice that they also use the participation measure, which is a measure of essentially a similar sort of measure of where young people are in terms of their journey over the entire year. And so in some ways that gives a better measure because it looks at it on a daily basis.
Thank you. That was much appreciated.
Councillor Anderson, I can't see you. I don't know if you've got any comments.
Yeah, well, I think the one area of concern I've heard quoted on several occasions, I haven't had a chance to talk to you about this yet, Mark, is about, in particular, we have quite an emphasis on education where kids are going to university. But I've heard figures quoted where a lot of kids are dropping out after 1 or 2 years, and that East Renfrewshire is one of the worst areas for that, apparently. I haven't been able to quantify or find this exact source of that, Mark. I don't know if it's the same thing that you've just spoken about, if that would actually include that.
No, happy to follow up on that one, Councillor Anderson. That is I'll not go as far as to say it's a myth, but it is something that is perpetuated on a regular basis, that our young people go off to university or to college or into positive destination and then are not well prepared, I suppose, for life in that way, and very quickly drop out and end up in a negative destination. That was obviously would be a very concerning picture, something we would take very seriously. But along with the snapshot that I was just mentioning to Councillor Pragnell, SDS do a follow-up survey in March, so that they look at where those levers are 6 months later, essentially. And when we look at the data there, it continues to show that East Renfrewshire levers are still at a very high level in terms of their positive destinations. So I would be happy to give you a bit more of a detailed breakdown at a future point.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Mark. That was a very helpful response. Again, to summarise from my perspective, I was really encouraged to see the depth and detail in this benchmarking report. Coming from private industry, to have this sort of level of detail and scrutiny on it from the business would be really wonderful to see. So I'm really encouraged by that. Very encouraged by the responses that we have specifically had on individual metrics. The level of detail in the response has been very, very helpful, very encouraging, and it sort of emphasises that the officers are taking this really seriously, because it is a good snapshot in time of where we are, where we're doing well, where we can improve, and it's clearly being embraced by the officers, which is really good to see. On top of that, I think it's very helpful and important that we're seeing education still performing incredibly well within Scotland. Obviously, that's difficult to sustain on a long-term basis, but we've been doing that for some time now, so that's, again, very encouraging. And in any areas where we have had very specific queries, for example, on roads and unclassified roads, etc., very full responses on that and in terms of how we're dealing with some of these issues. So again, that is very encouraging to see that officers are fully engaged on delivering the best performance possible with costs that are available. Specifically, you've addressed some of the actions that you're looking at in terms of performance improvements ongoing. You did flag that obviously this data is is lagging. You know, it's now 15 months out of date, and I understand the issues of getting comparison data. When will we have a position of where our 22 data can be looked at in comparison with historical records in isolation of a benchmarking? I don't know, Louise, if that's something you do or something you consider.
Yeah, I'll maybe bring in Mrs Brown and my colleague Morag Brown to give the detail about when we'll expect the next data set to come out. We do keep a close eye on these indicators across the year, and some of the indicators, some of the financial ones, also get updated a little bit earlier than the local government benchmarks through the SIPFA framework. It's the accountancy framework, so there would be some of them, like invoices, we will get to see quite after the summer. So they come out a bit earlier than the local government benchmarks do. But I'll maybe hand to Morag to give you a bit of detail on the timescales. Thanks.
Louise, Councillor O'Donnell, we won't get full comparative data until early next year. It's because of getting all the information from right across all the councils. But in terms of the individual indicators, some of those are already included in the council's own performance management arrangements. So you will see at council on the 29th, when you're looking at the overall performance, for example, in our main plan, we've got 14 indicators that are in this data set, but are all reported on in June to council. But it's in terms of getting the comparative data, the time lag is the time that it takes to get all the information together, and there's various stages at which information is collected. We provide some data directly to the Improvement Service. The Improvement Service get another set of data directly from Scottish Government sources, and also there's things like the Scottish Household Survey that data is taken from, so it's quite a patchwork to get all the data together. So it won't unfortunately be till early next year.
Thanks very much for that, Morag. And I'd just like to give you my thanks for the detailed response that you sent to me on a whole series of these measures. It was very full and very, very helpful, and gave me a lot of confidence that the officers are completely on top of this brief and taking it seriously, which is very good to see. So thank you very much for that. So unless there are any more comments, we'll move on to the next item on the agenda.
Could I have a few observations?
Sorry, I thought you had your opportunity earlier.
Oh, sorry. Apologies. I will take them up with individual officers.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Councillor. So if we can move on to the next item on the agenda.
Thank you, Leader. Do you want to just go ahead and then introduce the report?
Yes, please.
Yes, thanks. There seems to be something wrong with my teams here. Okay, thanks. This report highlights, if I could just set the context first about the three following reports. These were done under urgent or emergency decisions, which under various rules and regulations required to be reported to the Cabinet as soon as possible afterwards. So they're really just for noting and for background information. In that context, I'll try to be as brief as possible. I'm not seeking any particular decisions. I'm merely bringing the decisions that were made to the attention of the Cabinet, and on each of the three occasions referred to in each report, approval was sought from 2 members of the existing Cabinet at that particular time. So if I can move on in relation to the allocations policy changes. The report highlights a backlog in homelessness people waiting for housing, which arose mainly due to various issues related to COVID, which included restrictions on people moving houses, restrictions on emergency repairs, restrictions on social distancing once we could get in to do repairs, a whole range of things, and that's been with us for a while. The existing Council's allocations policy sets targets for different groups, which includes homelessness people, and that's outlined. There's a link in there to the existing one. As a result of the emergent situation at the time, we increased the percentage for homeless applicants, the percentage target for homeless applicants during 2020-21 and reported that back to the Cabinet. We increased the targets. However, with the emergent situation, and we constantly monitored it, we urgently needed to change this again to deal with the emerging homelessness situation. So in terms of paragraph 15 in the report, I can just quickly scroll down, we increased the percentage of new build council homes to be allocated to homelessness people from 25% to up to 70%. And for the existing council houses that we have, we increased the target from 55% to 70%. The report also sets out context in relation to our waiting lists, and that's all explained in paragraphs 9 to 14. And I think some of that will be of concern to elected members. So in effect, over the last few years, our waiting list, our general waiting list, has increased from something like 2,000 odd people to over 4,000 people. That's all outlined in paragraph 9 to 14. What I would say, though, this is a temporary measure that we're putting in place as an emergency between April and October of this year. And it's my intention, we're currently carrying out a full review of our allocations policy in the context of some of that information I've just relayed to you. There will be a full consultation as required by statute over the summer with various groups, and it's my intention to bring back a full comprehensive review of the allocations policy in around October or November to the Cabinet for their consideration. So in conclusion, what I would say is, over the last year or so, the need for the housing for homeless households has increased year on year. We've had real challenges and restrictions because of COVID, and it's caused a backlog in homeless households awaiting permanent accommodation. So those emergency changes were required to address that. A review of the existing policy, I've said, is underway to ensure that it addresses the housing concerns that I've just explained to you. And that, as I said, the full consultation exercise will be undertaken over the summer, and the outcome with recommendations and options presented to the Cabinet late autumn. Thank you. I'll have to answer any questions.
Thank you, Andy. Over to members.
Can I ask, Andy, why do you think there has been such a sudden increase in the general waiting list for housing? Because it just seems like such a big increase from over 1,000, nearly 2,000 increase. So, do you know why that is? And is it? Yeah.
Sorry, it's a really good point, and it's something that me and my staff are actively considering. So we're carrying out some work to try to find out why that is. I do know that one of the reasons, but I can't ascribe a figure to it, is since we started our new build council housing, they are so incredibly popular, and also resident tenants really like, potential tenants I should say, included, really like the choice-based letting system that we operate. And a combination of those factors, I think people, to be blunt, no longer see this as council housing as the poorest option. It's actually a desirable option, particularly in relation to new build houses. And what I could tell you is, recently when we advertised viewings for some of the new build council houses, there were literally thousands of applications for 30, 40 houses. The answer, Councillor Pragman, was this will be part of the exercise to try to dig in and find more information as to why that increase has happened and have some tighter figures around understanding that data. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Andy, and I look forward to the coming report in November. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Anderson, any comments, or have to move on? Andy, thanks very much for that report. It's obviously, I don't think anyone would believe it would be sustainable for us to carry on with these emergency measures for post-October, given the equity issues for other people on the waiting list. So I really thank you for undertaking the review and to come back to the Council in October with a review of the allocation policies and understanding the demands better for what's going on. So thank you very much for that point. Unless we have any other comments, we'll move on to the next item on the agenda, which again is Andy.
Okay, thank you very much, Leader. The purpose of this report is to inform members, as I said, under using emergency powers, about a decision that was made in relation to a place-based investment programme for 2021-22. I submitted a report to the previous Cabinet in November of last year, which outlined the list of schemes that we were going to put forward or tried to implement with estimated costs at the time for our 635,000 that was allocated for 2021-22. One of those schemes in relation to the proposals that were approved by the Cabinet was for a Dunterley multi-use games area, or MUGA, or MUGA, as people call them. And the estimated cost of that was £250,000. And that project was to replace the derelict MUGA that's currently down at Dunterley Resource Centre, adjacent to Dunterley Resource Centre, that's been completely wrecked, and the lighting and the surface had been set fire to. However, given various circumstances, the tender for that project, when it came back, resulted in potential costs of £450,000, compared to the original estimate of £250,000. In addition, only one tender was submitted. In the circumstances, I felt I could not justify that as being best value to the Council, but part of the problem was that all the contracts in relation to place-based investment programme under Scottish Government regulations required to be let or signed by the 31st of March 2022. In that situation, given that it was very late in the day, through no fault of our own, we tried to value engineer, we tried to retender, we did various things. We had to go back to the Scottish Government, who advised that no new activity, so we could be funded from that round of grant funding. So that meant that we couldn't come up with a new scheme and add it in to replace the £250,000. However, very helpfully, the Scottish Government pointed us in the direction of the existing programme and advised that any uncommitted funds, such as the £250,000 for the MUGA, could be allocated even at that late stage to existing approved place-based investment programme projects, provided again that we let the contract by the 31st of March. So my staff and I scrutinised all the schemes to see where could we do something very, very quickly so as not to lose the £240,000. We came up with two areas where it would be possible to do that. Those were the Nielsen Shopfront Improvement Scheme and the Young Enterprise Scheme premises at Rook and Glen Park Training Centre. Both those had previously been approved by the Cabinet. We had contracts, potential contracts and frameworks in place, so we could use that, we could do it quickly, and neither of them presented, for example, planning problems, as in planning development problems or ground condition problems or anything like that, that normally slows projects down. Both projects combined result in around £240,000 being directed towards two regeneration projects already approved by the Cabinet. In the circumstances then, I went ahead, sought very, very quickly and urgently sought support from two members of the Cabinet to make that change. We did that, went back to the Scottish Government and managed to secure the remaining £240,000 worth of grant for our existing programme. Had we not done that, unfortunately, we would have had to have returned the money to the Scottish Government. In relation to the two schemes, I would just like to point out the Nielsen Shopfront Improvement Scheme, where we go in and we give 100% grant to do up the front of the shops, make a bright, attractive environment, has been incredibly popular, and we've actually got a waiting list and demand. I think it was another 13 shops are in scope now with that addition to the project, and we've got people, shop owners that are willing and ready to sign up. On the Young Enterprise Scotland scheme, located down near at the back, behind the garden centre and near to the football park, it's a bit hidden, but what I would suggest is, if any members of the Cabinet at any point in time would like to come and see that facility, please do contact me and I'll arrange it. I went down to see it myself about 2 or 3 years ago. They used to be our premises. We leased them to Young Enterprise Scotland, and I have to say, The stuff that they are operating down there is absolutely fantastic in terms of what they're doing for young people with special needs, encouraging young people to be able to set up in business, look at teaching classrooms. Absolutely mind-blowing, fantastic facility. So it was really just in conclusion to let the Cabinet know, in terms under the existing regulations, that we managed to do something very quickly, save the day and secure £240,000 of external grant for the Council. Thank you.
Thanks, Andy. Members? Councillor Anderson, you fine?
No, I just want to mention that I think that's an excellent piece of work, and I'd be delighted to actually take up the opportunity to visit, Andy, if you can arrange.
I will arrange that.
Thank you.
Andy, I would echo Councillor Anderson's comments. I think we've got to commend you for acting so quickly to secure that funding and actually enhance some of the existing investments. So, you know, it could be very easy to sit on our hands and lose that funding, but we didn't. So credit to you and your team, and I think we've got a very good result of that. So well done. Thank you very much. And now,
comments back to my staff, much appreciated.
So Andy, it's over to you again for I think our final agenda item.
Okay, thank you, Leader. This is about the Cowan Park Enterprise and Community Hub. As some members might be aware, the Gatehouse or Lodge, or Gate Lodge, it comes under various terms at Cowan Park, has been derelict for a long, long time. It doesn't provide a very welcoming entrance to the park, and we've been looking at trying to improve the park for quite a while now. As an initiative in relation to that, we submitted a successful bid to the Scottish Government for the Regeneration Capital Grant Fund, which they operate. The total cost for the contract was $890,000, of which our capital programme made provision of $391,000, and the grant received or receivable from the Scottish Government was $499,000. In putting this project together, I just wanted to advise that what we're trying to do is create an enterprise and community hub. It's not just about doing up the lodge. So that hub will provide space for the delivery of skills development, improve employability prospects, training, capacity building for the third sector organisations, increased support for social enterprise and community groups, and there's also going to be health and wellbeing benefits for residents generally. We're looking to manage the project through a local organisation. Some councillors may well be aware of them. It's called the Include Me Too Club, who already operate services out of the Maguire building in the main street in Barhead. It's very successful, very popular, and very highly regarded. However, in relation to the contracts, and for members who don't have a lot of knowledge or experience of projects, when you sometimes get involved in particularly quite large projects like this, it's only when you start to dig the place up or take down things or start to look at design in further detail as you go through the project that sometimes things change that are very difficult or impossible to control. So due to external factors out with the Council's control, there has been an increase in the contract costs of £228,700. Some of the reasons was it's been a really challenging project. For example, we had a collapsed main sewer that had to be rerouted and renewed onto the mains road connection. We had increased costs due to COVID experiences, manpower and material staffing and material shortages and delays. And then as we developed the project, we had to do some scope enhancement, particularly to expand some toilets and disabled car parking. Excuse me. So, in conclusion, those additional works were required to complete the project, which had been started. And once you start a project, essentially you've got to finish it to try to get it open. However, my own economic development team went back to the Scottish Government Regeneration Capital Grant Fund unit to explain what had happened and the difficulties. They were very supportive of the project, they were very supportive and understanding of the situation that we were in, and somehow they managed to secure a further £200,000 grant to enable us to offset the additional costs of that project. Had that not been possible, Council would have been faced with the additional £228,000. It wasn't possible to seek a contract variation in time, so again I sought approval from 2 members of the Cabinet given the urgent situation. In terms of now funding the project, all that's left is a rather small shortfall given all the circumstances of £28,700, which I can finance internally, manage within existing resources within the environment section of the Council's General Fund Capital Programme. I've already talked to the Head of Accountancy, who has supported that approach in terms of the Council's financial regulations, and really it's to bring that to the attention of the Cabinet as I'm required to under schemes of delegation, etc., but also to highlight to you that this is going to be, it'll be open quite soon. I think it intended to open in June. I think it's been slightly delayed for various reasons, but this will be a fantastic facility for Barrhead. It'll be a fantastic opener to look at developing further Cowan Park to improve that facility. It will bring a presence, it will bring support to social enterprise, it will bring a redundant building into use, there will be cafe facilities. I think it's a fabulous addition to Cowan Park, and I hope that we'll all be able to see it open and successful very soon in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. Members, comments?
I would just like to thank the Environment Department for getting this project off the ground. I think you've done an excellent job in very trying times, and you've used your initiative when things outside your control happened. When will we have a date for when it's actually opening, and how far in advance will we get that date? I know it was originally June, but are we now talking July, August? When will there be a confirmed date?
Thanks, I'm happy to go and get that information for you and come back. As I understand it, it shouldn't be long, and I'll notify elected members of the opening date. That's helpful. Thank you, and thank you for your comments and support.
Councillor Anderson?
Yeah, just like to echo again what Councillor Pragnos just said there about doing a great job to get this over the line, and it will be great to see it being available, Andy. With regards to the facilities up there, I'm very keen to have drop-in facilities for kids where maybe the home learning environment, or just to study, or just in the ability to get internet access, a safe space really to go to. Is that something that the centre can offer or will offer?
That's something. It's certainly something I can look at. It's something I could consider, and I'll get somebody to look into that and come back to you. I think there might be something combined in my mind about the potential for what you've just said there, Councillor Anderson, in relation to Cowan Park Lodge, but also potentially in relation to the facility that I just talked about at Rooking Glen Park in Young Enterprise Scotland. So happy to look into that for you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Andy. Again, echoing the other members' comments, well done in securing the extra funding for this. I know this is an exciting project that's been eagerly anticipated by the local community in Barrhead, and in particular by Include Me Too and all of the people that use their services, and look forward to seeing it up and running. So well done again. Thank you very much, Andy.
Thank you.
And unless there's any other competent business, I think we can now close the meeting. So thank you very much, officers and members, for joining us today. Thank you. Bye-bye.